Judy Woodruff has more.
And for that, we go to Aleem Saitoff, the spokesperson for the World Uyghur Congress and the vice president of the Uyghur American Association, both of which promote the rights of Uyghurs. Born and raised in East Turkestan, which China calls Xinjiang, he came to the United States in 1996. And Min-Shin Pei, a professor of government at Claremont McKenna College. He has written extensively about China. We invited the Chinese embassy to participate in this discussion, but they declined. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. Aleem Saitoff, let me begin with you. The Uyghurs have been in this region for centuries. Were the tensions just running so high that something was inevitable like this?
The tensions has been rising very high because of the Chinese government's political propaganda and indoctrination of the Chinese people in Chinese nationalism and portraying Uyghurs, especially after 9/11, as terrorists, separatists, and Islamic radicals. So in the minds of the Chinese government, Uyghur people, their very presence in East Turkestan or Xinjiang is a threat. So there is so much racism going on. As a result, we are witnessing what is happening in our homeland, unfortunately.
Min-Shin Pei, how do you describe what's been going on in this region?
Well, this has been a restive part of China. In the mid-90s, the situation was much worse. Then after a while, things quieted down a little bit. But in the last few years, tensions began to rise again for a variety of very complex reasons.
And what are some of those reasons?
Economic being one, because that part of China has huge natural resources, oil deposits, natural gas deposits, and the exploration of these resources is deeply resented by the local population.
And the Chinese government has moved, what, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Han Chinese into this region.
Yeah, that sort of policy is a long-standing policy. Since the early 50s, the Chinese government has been steadily settling migrants there. But in recent years, it's more driven by private entrepreneurship. There's no explicit government encouragement, but the government has been enabling the migration of private entrepreneurs into that part of the region, and that, of course, has contributed to the ethnic tensions.
Aleem Saitoff, when you say racism, what specifically are you talking about?
When I talk about is in China, because of the Chinese government's political brainwashing, basically, of the Han Chinese population, to describe the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and other ethnic minorities as lazy, violent, barbaric, and they don't want development, and they don't want to live in peace, and they are troublemakers, they are writers, and they are the problematic peoples in those areas. As a result, we see high tension between the Uyghurs and Chinese, between the Tibetans and Chinese, between the Mongols and the Chinese, unfortunately. And because of this, there is huge resentment on both sides. The Chinese hate the Uyghurs hate the Chinese. Then something like that can spark a huge ethnic and racial clash, which turn out to become such a violent event.
So Min-Shin Pei, I'm going to come to you with a question I started with Mr. Saitoff. Was this just something waiting to happen?
Oh, yes, absolutely, because the underlying conditions are very tense. You have lack of communication, dialogue between the ethnic groups, especially between the Han Chinese and the Uyghurs, and then you have official rhetoric about separatism, terrorism, extremism, and then, of course, economically, as I said, the distribution of wealth has been another issue. And then, of course, on top of this, we had rumors prior to this incident about Uyghurs being killed in southern China.
Aleem Saitoff, the Chinese government has also has said the Uyghurs are separatists, that they want to separate from the Chinese mainland, and that many of them are terrorists. How much truth is there to that charge, those set of charges?
Yes, the charges are patently false. And with regard to terrorism, after 9/11, the Chinese government successfully used and conveniently used the global war on terrorism to label Uyghur people's displeasure as terrorism. Today, the Chinese government even criminalized Uyghur thought, what they call as spiritual terrorism. So for any Uyghur who writes and speaks out against Chinese government, the Chinese government can basically charge that Uyghur as a terrorist as a separatist, and if that person is religious, can be charged as a religious fundamentalist by the Chinese authorities. And after 9/11, the Chinese authorities launched so many strike hard campaigns, and after last year's Olympics, the Chinese authorities began what they call as life and death struggle against the Uyghur people.
I've just been told by our producer that the Chinese president has left the G8 summit in Europe to head home because of the problems in Xinjiang province. Min Pei, how much evidence does the Chinese government have that the Uyghurs are trying to undermine the government, overthrow the government, whatever other charges they've made against them?
Well, there are two parts. First of all, relating specifically to this very tragic incident, the Chinese government has claimed that overseas Uyghur organizations have masterminded this incident, but of course we need to see more evidence. The other is...
Which incident are you referring to?
I mean, the Sunday's
what happened
bloody
on
riot.
Sunday.
Yes,
yeah.
But more generally, the Chinese government also needs to convince the rest of the world that the Uyghur population or the Uyghurs do have a significant number of people who are intent upon separating from China through violent means. Yeah.
Aleem Saitov, what is it that the Uyghurs want? Is there agreement among them about what they want?
Under today's circumstances, under the brutal killing of the Uyghurs and some other Han Chinese, this kind of high racial tension, and if you ask an ordinary Uyghur, and the majority will probably believe that an independent country is a good idea, because there is no way for
independent country.
There is no way for Uyghurs to live peacefully and freely their culture, their language, their way of life, their religion, respect under the current Chinese communist rule. But we and Mr. Abdulkadir, whom the Chinese government accused as instigating this event.
This is the Uyghur. She's living considered a leader of
yes.
one of the organizations you belong to, living
yes.
here in Washington.
Yes, she's a Uyghur Democrat leader, and she's also the president of the World Uyghur Congress. And we are basically seeking self-determination for the Uyghur people. And that's a hope, so that the Uyghur people can choose what kind of political destiny they want.
Min Pei, how realistic is any of that?
That's not a very realistic aspiration, even though, of course, it's understandable given the current circumstances, because I think as long as China stays together as an effectively governed country, the Chinese government will most likely enjoy the support of the majority of the Chinese people. When China is made up of 92% of Han majority, a separated Uyghur state is a very unlikely outcome. But of course, the most realistic outcome is a degree of autonomy, self-government, mutual respect, understanding, and also mutually beneficial economic relationship.
So you think that's possible, that the
that's
Chinese
possible
government...
with the right policy. That's why I think this tragedy is a wake-up call for the Chinese government. They need to review their past ethnic policies and ask themselves where we need to make changes.
Is that a path that the Uyghurs would accept if that were what the Chinese government moved toward?
If that is exactly what the Chinese government wants to move to that direction, I think Uyghur people can be persuaded to accept this kind of solution. If a genuine autonomy, high-level autonomy can be given to the Uyghurs, where their ethnicity, their culture, their language, their way of life can be respected, the Uyghur people, I'm sure they would accept that. But before I agree with this, it is in 1955 the Chinese government actually gave the Uyghurs Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, but have never implemented the autonomy laws. China also gave Tibet autonomy, but never implemented the autonomy laws. So both the Tibetans and Uyghurs do not trust this kind of autonomy talk until and unless the Chinese government genuinely comes to the negotiation table and make this kind of offers, change its 6-decade-long repressive policies in Tibet, in East Turkestan, then things may change for the better.
All right, we're going to leave it there for tonight and watch it very closely. Continue to. Aleem Saitov, Min Pei, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.